what Eduardo told you tonight, but what it's going to really tell you is that that's the way it was 50 years ago. And the point that I'm going to make in the end is that things haven't changed. And if you want the Hispanic vote, you're going to have to change. They're not going to change. The Hispanic vote's not going to change. You, the Democratic Party, is going to have to realize that you haven't done too good a job at really reaching out for the Hispanic vote. And therefore, if the consequences of it are that had you worked differently or a little harder, you would have gotten Bill Nelson elected, and you would have gotten Andrew Gillum elected, and it could have been done right here in Broward County. You don't have to go out of Broward County. You could have elected both of them had this campaign been run differently. So let me go back to, as I said, some anecdotal things. So I get into Democratic Party politics because I'm in my early 30s, and I had served in the Florida legislature and had decided that I didn't really like Tallahassee. I really did like it, but I liked being home better. And in those days, I was also the president of a family company that I was building up. And I had taken it, by that time we already had over 2,000 employees. So it was a big company, and it was really running. It had a difficult time, and I had straightened it out and gotten a lot of young executives like me, and I was in my 30s. And we had restructured the company, and it was working, so I decided I was eventually going to go back to Puerto Rico and run for governor of Puerto Rico. But I needed some political experience, and I couldn't get it in Puerto Rico, so I would get it in Florida. And that I thought would be somewhat transferable to what I wanted to do in Puerto Rico, which was to run for governor in the Partido Estadista, which in those days originally was the Republican statehood party, and then eventually it became the Partido Nuevo Progresista, which my uncle Luis Ferre had founded. Luis Ferre, along with many of the Puerto Ricans of the past who were political leaders for statehood, were Republicans. And so it was the Republican statehood party. It went from being the Republican Party to the Republican statehood party, and then there was a split in the party, and a new party was created, Partido Nuevo Progresista, the New Progressive Party. My uncle ran and became governor of Puerto Rico in '68. So back in those years, I decided that I would go to Tallahassee and learn a little bit about politics, and I did. But then there was an opening. Robert King High would run for governor as a Democrat. It was a wonderful mayor of Miami, had been mayor for 10 years, decided to run for governor, and he beat a sitting incumbent governor. And people were shocked by that. Then he turned around and lost to Claude Kirk, who was a complete unknown, had never run for office, but won. It was the first Republican governor since Reconstruction. So I served in the legislature. There was an opening on the City of Miami Commission because Bob High died, and the sitting mayor of Miami, and Steve Clark became mayor of Miami, and there was an opening on the commission. So I decided to do that. So I got a call one day from Larry O'Brien, who was one of the old war horses of the Irish war horses of the Kennedy administration. I get a call from Larry O'Brien, and I had been told the day before by Senator Smathers, George Smathers, that I was going to get that call. And Larry O'Brien said, "Young man, we have decided that that Hubert Humphreys told me that he wants you to be the chairman of the Humphrey campaign in Florida."
Wow.
So I was kind of shocked at that story. I said, well, Mr. O'Brien, that's amazing. I said, well, drop everything you have, get on a plane, come to Washington, and let's talk about it. So I walked in, we went to the same discussion, and I said, Mr. O'Brien, he said, no, call me Larry. I said, well, Larry, this is very, I'm 31 to 32 years old. I'm not even the mayor of Miami. I've only been in this for a couple of years. I just don't understand why you would even choose me. So I'll tell you what, if you give me an honest answer, I will accept your offer. And here's the question that I have. How many other people have you offered this to have turned it down? So he said 19. And of course the reason was obvious, Hubert Humphrey wasn't going to carry Florida. But I said, well, okay, I'll do it. So I became, a couple of days later I got a call and said, listen, we've all been talking and you're only 31 years old and we decided that you're going to be co-chairman. So I said, that's fine too. So some labor leader from Tampa was my co-chairman, and we ran the Humphrey campaign. So I was told that I was to completely ignore George Wallace and that the enemy was Nixon. Well, I knew that that wasn't the case. And sure enough, a week later, I got a knock on the door of the campaign office, and there's Tyler Abel, who was Drew Pearson. These are names that you guys, some of your older guys may remember. Drew Pearson was a great journalist in America. And Tyler was Drew Pearson's stepson. And I got a fellow by the name of Tommy O'Neill, who was Tip O'Neill's son, ended up being governor of Massachusetts, to come down and help me run the Humphrey campaign, because they knew that I was going off the deep end. And here's what the deep end was. There was no question in my mind that the enemy was George Wallace. And that's exactly what happened. The reason why Humphrey did not carry Florida was because George Wallace got almost 40% of the vote in Florida, and that was in 1968. Now, fast forward, I want to tell you honestly, well, not fast forward to today, fast forward to 2010. 68 to 2010 is 4 years. So, all my campaigns were always, all the polling and the focus groups were done by a wonderful Floridian. And a fellow by the name, he died, and then a fellow by the name of John Dave Beatty.
Hamilton campaigns.
Hamilton, yeah. Bill Hamilton was the guy that did all my campaigns. And he died, and Dave Beatty took over the Hamilton business. So I got a hold of him because he ran, I thought, and I still think, that he was the guy that ran Bill Nelson's campaigns. And so I got together with him and I said, listen, this is 2010, 8 years ago. So the only way that Bill Nelson is going to win is he has to concentrate on developing the Hispanic campaign. Well, long story short, that never happened. So fast forward to 2018, I go through the same routine all over again. And I called Dave Beatty, who has become my good friend, and we talk a lot about politics. I said, Dave, this time you got to pay attention to me, because the Democratic Party, and I've been doing this now for 50 years, and I know exactly what's going to happen. It's the same thing over and over and over and over again. And that is that the Democratic Party takes the Hispanic vote for granted and feels that they can just turn the switch on a couple of months before and all the votes flow. Well, it don't work that way. It never did, and it never will. The only way you can do this is you cannot ever take people for granted, and that includes the black community. I want to give you one more anecdotal thing to show you, and I'll tell you the punchline. I'll give you the punchline up front. So I think that politics, campaigning, is like what's the word I'm looking for when you ride the waves? Huh? Surfing. It's like surfing. Obviously, I'm not a surfer, or I wouldn't have forgotten that. So, in surfing, the surfers tell me that in different parts of the wave, you have to distribute your weight differently, or you get wiped out. So it's all about balance on how you change your balance. As the wave changes, you have to change your balance. So I've always thought that politics is the art of changing your balance with the wave, because you have to ride the wave and you have to know where to be and what point, or otherwise you get wiped out.
Yes.
Now, in 1979, my friend and fellow commissioner in the city of Miami, Rose Gordon, came to see me, and she said, "Look, you've been a good mayor and I like you personally, but I'm older than you are, and I see all these Cubans coming into Miami. And when you first ran for mayor of Miami in 1973, the Hispanic vote was only 5%. So obviously I was not elected by the Hispanic vote. And I see that you have that Hispanic vote, but I see that it's getting bigger and bigger. And this is my last chance at running for public. This is my last chance at being mayor of Miami, so I'm going to run against you." So she did. So in that election, and I won't go through it with you, we got one more order over here. In that election, and I won't go through it with you, she beat me badly in the white non-Hispanic vote. I got the Hispanic vote, and we split the black vote. And I won. Two years later, those elections were every 2 years, my other colleague, Manolo Rebozo, Cuban-American Democrat, who had helped me with the Humphrey campaign in '68, was now a commissioner in the city of Miami, and he said, "Listen, you've now been mayor of Miami since '73, that's 8 years, and it's time for somebody else to be mayor, and the Cubans are now the majority, and I'm going to run for mayor." And you know what? That campaign, he really was going to beat me. So he didn't want to become a Republican, but here's what he did. He got all of his Republican friends to take him to Washington, and he got his picture taken with Ronald Reagan at the White House. And they came back and they put all these posters in Little Havana with Manolo Rebozo and Ronald Reagan. Well, guess what? I took that poster and had 10,000 of them made, and there wasn't a post in Overtown or Liberty City that didn't have that same poster up. Yeah. And basically what I did, thanks to the backing of Mrs. Athley Range, who was a wonderful woman, and Carrie Meek, who was not a congresswoman yet, she was in the Florida House and then the Senate, and all of the leadership, the black leadership of Miami, all got behind me. But here's the result of that election. This is the first and the last time in Miami, in a non-presidential year, where 64% of the registered black community in Miami came out to vote. 64%. Non-presidential Miami elections are on odd years. Non-presidential odd year. 64% turnout, and I got 98% of the vote. Now, that happened in 2 years. So, from 79 to 81, I really had to change the way I was riding that surfboard and distribute my weight differently. And the moral of the story is that politics is always changing. And you cannot assume it's like war. Yesterday's war is invalid for tomorrow's war. You know, and that's why that picture of General Patton was such a wonderful picture, because it showed that Patton understood that. And he understood what Rommel was doing, because he said, Rommel, I read your book and I know exactly what you're doing. He was fighting today's war. I want to tell you that the election in 2020 is not going to be like the election in 2018 or 2016. These elections are all different. The one thing, or I should say the two things, because that's what Eduardo told us. The two things that we have to pay attention to is we have to start early, and we must take into account that every Hispanic community is different. Their needs are different. Their views are different. Venezuelans are not Colombians, I'm sorry. And Colombians are not Peruvians. And so we have to understand, but to understand, we have to realize that there is a difference, number one. We have to understand that it is fluid. That because you had that vote yesterday doesn't mean you're going to have that vote tomorrow. And then you're going to have to understand how you reach that community, whether it's through focus groups or polling or whatever the methodology is that is used. You have to be inside. You can't do it from the outside. And the Democratic Party of Broward County and the Democratic Party of Miami-Dade County and the Democratic Party of the state of Florida do not today understand that. And they never have understood it. And unless you understand it, you're going to lose again. So wake up to the reality of where we are, and if you want to win, deal with the real world, not with the imagined world. So thank you very much for having me, and I'm happy to join you.
Thank you so much, Marie. Does anybody have any questions for Mayor Ferre?